Residency colleagues. We are bringing to you a pop-up puzzle of practice, a peer-to-peer coaching event sponsored by the statewide Residency Technical Assistance Center. SRTAC is a network of regional support through hubs at each of 5 county offices from the northern to the southern regions, each staffed to support your residency programming efforts. SRTAC is a California collective of multiple agencies to include the 5 county offices, UCLA, West Ed, the Residency Lab, and the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Today's session is on data collection along the way. We are lucky to have Soo Hyun Han-Harris from Oakland Unified School District to share with us how she has collected her residency data along the way in preparation for submitting the required CTC data report.
Hi, everyone. I'm Soo Hyun Han-Harris from OUSD, and I coordinate the residency program here along with other teacher pathways on the recruitment and retention team. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of framing. I'm going to share my screen about some of the basic understandings that I came to. In my mind, I came to them. I wish I had come to them sooner because I did have a couple years of really struggling with how to report for the residency grants that we have. And there were some basic understandings that kind of clicked into place for me that helped me to create a tracking sheet that is a lot more user-friendly for me when I'm actually then trying to fill out the annual report, and also as a way to track the residents who are in our programs. Some of the understandings that informed this sheet was that one, anyone who's used grant funds needs to be on the sheet. So regardless of how many years they've served or have not served, but if they've used any grant funds, they should be reported on the sheet to the CTC. But anyone who is teaching without a preliminary credential or does not have their preliminary credential does not actually get tracked on the years tab. And I think that piece of understanding was really kind of tripping me up a lot in the past, because I was like, well, then how do we know what they're doing if they're not going on the sheet? And so, and I inherited this program with several different residency pathways. So it was partly figuring out the thinking of the person who was holding it before me and kind of understanding what the requisites were for the CTC. Another understanding is anyone who has used 2018 grant funds but hasn't completed all of their service years needs to be tracked beyond the grant sheet. And the funds either need to be recouped from the candidate or absorbed by the lead agency. And that's our prerogative to decide what to do. But the 2021 grant funds, that's where if you have a candidate who's used funds, who's received stipend funds, but not used any of the funds for tuition, then those funds do not need to be recouped if they don't complete their service years. And then also anyone who's working for half a school year within their credential area as a teacher of record, that half year will count towards his full service year. So those are some of the basic understandings. I'm gonna share the sheet that I created. You can see that I've listed out the cohorts here, cohort 1, cohort 2, and since I'll be sharing this spreadsheet, I removed any identifiers here, and then up to cohort 4. And then I like to track like demographics, because one of the goals that we have as part of this residency and also just in the district is the data has shown that students who are taught by educators who reflect their critical identities tend to fare better in the classroom. And so that is definitely a value of ours that's driving our program. So I like to track data around race and gender on the sheet. It helps me to have that data handy. And then this notes column, this is information about where and in what position candidates worked when they're not completing their service years. So this is where I put internal information so I know what's going on with them and where they're at within the district. Column E, outstanding, is where I note if they haven't received their preliminary yet, what they still have left to complete if I have that information. So their CSET, the RECA, the TPA, etc. And then the residency year is the year that they were in their placement. And then I check, after the residency year, I check on the CTC dashboard. And because I'm in HR, I have access to our internal systems. So if I have a resident who has a fairly common name, I can do secure searches on the CTC. So this is where I get their preliminary issuance date information. And then as well as their clear issuance date for column H. So this person here, as you can see, person 1 in the first cohort, their residency year was in 1920. They received their preliminary at the end of that school year. So smooth sailing. And then they went into their first year of teaching in 2020, 2021 with their preliminary credential. So this is where I recorded them here. So I put in their year 1 was in 2020, 2021. They were teaching at this high school. And I also know from having spoken to my colleagues who run our induction program that this person was enrolled in induction in that same year in the first year of their service year. So this is like the model, I would say, model example here. So here's somebody who went through the residency year, got their preliminary at the conclusion of that year, and then went and enrolled in induction right away, got a position. And then actually this person in year 2, they were at the same school, but they didn't complete their induction that year because I think they had some portion of it was incomplete, but they did complete it by year 3 and they were still teaching at the same school. And then year 4, they completed their service year. And I've been tracking year 5 with them just for my own, I just wanted to know, like, I'd like to keep tracking residents to see longevity for the long term. So what I want to show you next is how this person actually translates then to the grant report form. So this is a copy of an actual grant report form, but I've modified it so that I haven't modified the actual format of it, so this should be what it looks like for us all when we're reporting, but I changed it so that it's also anonymous. So you'll see that back on this form, I've highlighted in yellow the folks that I think would be interesting and useful to trace across the grant reporting form. So we're starting with cohort 1, person 1, and on the grant report form, here's cohort 1, person 1. So I've linked in here, and I'll share this spreadsheet as well. I've linked in here the seed number lookup link that's provided by the CTC. And so it's a great place to go and just do a quick lookup for folks if you don't have them in your system yet. And then the enroll date for this person, the partnering program that they were with, the credential area, their race. This column H here is back at the beginning. The person before me was tracking other demographic data, which we don't do anymore, aside from race and gender. And then, sorry, that's STEM. That's the credential. That's the column F is STEM, the grant credential umbrella. And then column J is the specific credential area. And then column K is where you put your clinical placement code. And then I've linked on there the CDE school directory where you could do quick searches for the schools and get that code. And then, of course, you would put your mentor name, look up the seed numbers for your mentor, etc. So that's program enrollment for that person. So we know, having looked at that tracking sheet, that that person completed. And so here's their basic information again. They passed the TPA. And this information I actually get directly from the person if I'm not getting it from the IHE partner. So I'll reach out to them. In the past, we've used Google Forms for them to fill out, but I find it's easier for me to just pick up the phone and call them, send them a text or an email just to check in with them. And then, yeah, I put on your info from the candidate, like about the TPA and the RICA, the CSET, et cetera. And then looking on the CTC, I put, yes, they were recommended for their preliminary, and I saw that they were recommended on June 30th. And that's it for their program completion. So here's year one teaching. Here's the same person, and they were at the school, et cetera, et cetera. All of that information. Yes, I know that they were enrolled in induction that year, and I put the year. And again, I have that information from my colleagues over on the induction team. And did they complete it? I wrote no. And that was it for year one. Moving to year two, same information here and the same enrollment date for induction, but this person hadn't completed induction in year two because they had that missing piece. And so I just put in the notes, the reason they were not recommended is because they had an incomplete for induction. They were not recommended for the clear. And then in year three, same information. I made sure that it's here. Yes, they were enrolled in induction, but this year was the year that they actually completed. And then they received the recommendation for the clear on September 20th, 2023. So then I put that here. And then year four, same information across the board. And it basically repeats the information that we have for year three. I'd like to review with you person 3 from cohort 1 because they have an interesting situation that I think might be helpful to see in terms of grant tracking. So cohort 1, person 3, they also their residency year is also 1920, but they didn't receive their preliminary until August 2023. And this part was really confusing for me for grant. I was like, I thought they went on there because I had seen them on there from previous reports, but I realized that actually their first year, if you look here in column I, their first year isn't until this year, 2024, 2025. What did they do in the intervening time? This is where my notes section, I wrote, this person is enrolling in induction in 24-25. They worked off and on without a preliminary from 2020 through the school year 2024. So, and then there's some more detail there about what exactly they were doing. But so after the residency year, they took a break, they did other things, and then they completed their requirements. They got their preliminary in 2023. So any of those years that they taught, if they had taught between the residency year and the issuance of their preliminary, they're not being tracked. So I'm not putting them on my sheet. Aside from these notes, I'm not putting them on my sheet until this school year. So I talked to this person at the beginning of the year. They're like, I found a position. So they're teaching, and this is the only thing that you'll see on the grant reporting sheet. So let's pop over there real quick. Okay, so that's cohort 1, person 3. I have all of their information here, and normally, of course, all of these columns would be filled in with the seed numbers, etc. So they were enrolled, and I have all of that information here. And then in terms of program completion, they passed the TPA. This has been updated, but back when they had just finished their residency year, this information was different, of course, because at that point, they may not have passed the TPA or the CSET, but this has all been updated since then. So you'll see that information here. And then you'll see that their preliminary was issued in August 2023. Moving to year one teaching. So after the school year 1920, the year 2020, 21, 21, 22, and 22, 23, like they're not showing up anywhere on these year stats because they haven't done any, they don't have their preliminary yet. So the CTC is not asking us to track that person at this point. So they're not showing up until year one. And in year one, you'll see here their hire date is the beginning of this school year, 2024. So I wrote that, that's the date that reflects their first school year. And then that information, the rest of that information is here. I know that they enrolled in induction, but they have not completed it, of course, because they just started this year. And then you'll see in year two, it's going to look weird because here they are in row 6, but they don't have any information, unlike their colleagues, even though they're part of the same cohort. He doesn't have any information, and I won't be putting this information in until the next school year, if he indeed stays in the district and continues to work with this preliminary. And it's same for year 3 and year 4, no information for that person. The more useful person to look at may be this person 6 right here. So this person actually completed the residency year, but did not complete all of their requirements. And then they left before they got their preliminary. And they don't have their preliminary as of today. So what's happening is that this person actually used grant funds, and went through their residency year, but did not complete according to the CTC definition, and also has not served any of their service years. So back on our tracking document, they're definitely here. Person 6 is having enrolled, doing their placement, and then for program completion, we wrote no, not recommended for their preliminary. And then I wrote left LEA, needed the TPA and CSET, and this person left before she could complete it.
So can we see what that looks like in your teaching tabs?
Yes. So here it is. This person is here, and I'm definitely going to track the amount that she's spent in the grant funding and the grant funding and the matching funds tabs. But there's zero information here about in years 1 through 4. There's no information for this person because they haven't actually taught with a preliminary credential. I have a tab here where it says budget calc, and I just wanted to share, in case this is useful for anybody, how I've laid out the money pieces. So I have on here the grant number from the CTC, and then it's not always easy for me to remember the details of each grant, so I just put them here as a handy place to have that information. This grant supports 12 residents. The years of the grant are here, the total grant funds, and then how much our matching funds are here. Now, this just literally mimics what our Appendix G looks like. It has nothing more and nothing less. And I tend to follow it unless there's been some significant change on the matching funds section, but I follow it. And what I did was I only put the categories where we had amounts determined on the grant report. So I listed those categories here according to the appendix. I put the total grant fund amount and then the individual amount that it would break down into per resident or for mentor. So that's all here. And then I have the totals down at the bottom. And then I have that also for the other grant, the more 2021 grant that we have. And then when it comes time to filling out the funding pieces, it makes it so much easier because then I can just transfer over that information only in the categories where we've said that we needed funds for. And so I translate that over here. I just want to say, here's somebody who we didn't talk about, but person 7 from cohort 3, they must have had something where they did not complete the program. And so you can see that their amounts are less. And what we do is we calculate it. We calculate it based on what percentage of the year they've completed or what percentage of the funds they've used. And then we prorate that and put that on here. For the matching side, I just straight up copy the numbers over because I know that unless there's been some significant change, our assessment of what we were going to spend matching and in-kind funds is pretty accurate. And so I have confidence that I can just use those numbers here. You'll see that, for example, for the 2 folks that we reviewed, person 4 and person 6 here, neither of them finished or started induction. And so I left those out here, but everything else stays the same. And so the numbers are pretty consistent across the board. But this is like the chart that I created is pretty helpful because it just takes the guess. Like I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel every time. I'm looking at the numbers. What did we say we were going to spend? And if the person went through the residency year, those are the numbers that I'm putting in. And what were the amounts that we said we were going to match or provide in kind? Then I just transfer those numbers in as well. These were some of the learnings. Again, anyone who's used grant funds needs to be on the sheet. Anyone teaching without a preliminary credential does not get tracked on the year tabs. But of course, it would be useful to track them informally for those who are coordinating the program. Anyone who's used grant funds for 2018 but hasn't fulfilled their service commitment years, they need to be tracked beyond the grant reporting. And then anyone working for half a year with their preliminary credential as a teacher of record can count that year towards their service year. And then a little bit about where this information comes from as a recap. I work across departments. I work with our induction team to understand about like induction completion process. We use the CTC dashboard. And again, we have internal HR systems that we have access to. That's where I can track employment. What position is this person actually in? And what percent of time have they worked? And I'm also doing direct communication with residents and former residents. And so especially those who haven't completed their requirements, I have a schedule set up so that I'm checking in with them. I'd like to check in with them at least once a year, ideally more than that. And in some cases, there are residents that I check in with fairly often because they're also like really just struggling to meet those requirements. And just, I think it's helpful for them to have like more of a social emotional connection and support for completion. So that's happening. I think that if I should ever set up like a schedule, I would say maybe October, because that's a good time to know like who's enrolled and who's enrolled for this year, and also who's enrolled for induction from the previous year, who's completed, who's enrolled for their second year of induction. It's like gives enough time for some of that data to be set, and then in the summer to get completion information for both, I would say.